So you all thought the Tiger King craze was over? Think again. Because now we're back with a new drama series coming to Peacock. And this time we're going to be reviewing Joe versus Carole. What's up, folks, and welcome back to the channel today for another review. And today we're reviewing the series Joe versus Carole, coming to Peacock March 3rd. Now, yes, let's go back just a little bit here. The Tiger King craze that completely swept the world was it was one of the most unbelievable documentaries I had ever seen. And the fact that, like, not only for what the content was, but like the social media memes and just all the things that went beyond that. And then obviously we got season 2 and the Doc and Tale story. And at one point you think like, well, this Tiger King stuff is never going to end, because why not? It's making them money, I guess. And then obviously the things that are really happening in real life with Joe Exotic and whatnot with Donald Trump. So, you know, Tiger King is never going anywhere. And thus you got, all right, well, we got this new series, Joe versus Carole, coming out. Why do I want to watch that? Like, I've already seen this story 20 times over now. But the biggest reason that lured me to want to watch this, that really made me excited to want to watch this, is simply put, Peacock really has some momentum going right now. Bel-Air is fantastic, and Bel-Air took a sitcom and dramatized it, and it's working. So I said, well, maybe they're going to do the same thing. They're going to take a documentary, dramatize it, and maybe it'll be good. And thus, I gotta say, I'm thoroughly surprised at how much I enjoyed this. And knowing a lot about the story already, but obviously there's some fluff to it as well, which I appreciated, which we'll talk about in a little. It really came together very, very good. But the biggest thing to take from the entire series is the acting. The folks that played, you know, are very iconic characters in this whole clusterfuck of a story, they really embody them, these individuals, and to the point that you almost think that Kate McKinnon is really Carole Baskin, like for real, like not no actor playing her, but really her, like for real. And John Cameron Mitchell, who plays Joe Exotic, is fantastic. There's so many different people that like truly embodies these characters, like up and down the board. I mean, yes, we got Joe versus Carole, but everybody is involved in this. Everybody that was involved in the documentary is absolutely a part of this series in one way, shape, or form. And when they come in and they're wearing the same clothes that they had on, like, you instantly know it's them. And then when you look at their face, you're like, oh my God, is it really them? You know what I mean? So it's really, really good. And also, if you've been like very crazy about Tiger King, well, this is based off of the Over My Deadly Body podcast season 2. So there you have, like, you know, where the source material came from, which, you know, if you don't know, I mean, shall I say, it's basically going back through Joe's versus Carole whole rivalry for over the last 10 years between the zoo, the threats, you know, the retaliations, you know, just two bittersweet enemies going at it. But yeah, let's kind of talk about this a little bit more. Now, I gotta say, the biggest thing for me that I really enjoyed besides the acting was, again, the filler to some of the story. And I hate to say this, but the biggest conclusion I got from this is that Joe and Carole are just basically almost two in the same, but rotating around the axis of just being polar opposites. Like, it just happens to be this almost kinetic energy between the two of them that makes them obsessed with one another, that at times you see them performing the exact same way that they're despising the other person in. And like, you know, it's easy to say Joe Exotic by name and everything is the crazy one, but obviously the whole thing got crazy because everybody thought Carole Baskin killed her husband. So like, we see that there's kind of an evil in both of them, but I don't think it ever clicked to me that they were actually, like, you know, more or less the same, but just on a polar opposite, rotating around the axis, so that if any given point they were on the same part, they would literally be the same person, which is really weird, because I started to think, like, you know what, if they actually did ever meet, besides the one time they came face to face, well, they only basically came face to face 2 times. One time when Joe was in the helicopter, and the other time when he was in court, about to go to jail. So, you know, I think if they actually would have took time to actually talk, they might have actually been friends, like for real. That was just like the craziest thing to kind of think about it or whatever. But we just so you know, Carole was all about big cat activism, and the exotic one was about having the most exotic zoo with all the big cats. And I mean, the story goes from everything of her missing husband to the lawsuit, trademark infringement, $1 million lawsuit, shall I say, him running for governor, and then Carole trying to get this bill passed or whatnot. So like, these are sort of the, you know, the events of the big thing, but you already know all these things from the documentary. Another thing before I forget, while all this is happening too, you actually see the documentary being made. And so like, don't forget that, like, the documentary is truly, you know, it's actual footage. It's not a documentary in retrospect of all the events that happened. This was a planned idea for Joe the entire time, because Joe was very egotistical and he wanted to, you know, he was the self-proclaimed Tiger King. So yeah, he had the filmmakers, they come out here and record me. And like, you see these things happening during the series, and like, oh, okay. And then that's the really cool part, because you see these one-for-one shots of the scenes that you see in the documentary on Netflix happening within the series here on Peacock. So yeah, and I think that, you know, another thing I was interested about this is that I thought that this series may come off a little biased to try to drive a narrative. My first one was like, I bet you it's gonna be a documentary about what really happened to Carole's husband, and it wasn't. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe it's just going to be one about exploiting just how crazy Joe Exotic was. Yes, that was there, but it also showed how, you know, unhinged Carole was at times. So like, it was very unbiased. It gave you both perspectives, and that's why I keep saying, like, there was really, they're really one and the same. They really are. And let's talk about when, you know, when Carole first met Don Lewis, which was crazy as well too. They met, and he had a gun, and he allowed her to hold the gun to his head because he met her in the middle of the night after she had left her other husband. She just has a long story of just having failing relationships because she's truly obsessed with cats, and that's all she cares about. And to be honest, we'll talk about it in a second, no man was ever good enough for her. Not saying that Don was a saint, but also I don't think we ever truly depicted like how manipulative Don was, because in this they certainly did. Like, they made it seem like Don like was just using her for her money to go back to Puerto Rico to build real estate, and he just dipped out, which was a really interesting thing. And while they did come back around to kind of draw a motive to that, it did not come off like that originally. It was just kind of like, oh, he knew that Carole was really good at her job in terms of real estate and whatnot, and he dumped her account because she was using her, she was getting her money together to get her a sanctuary, and he was like, nah, I'm just gonna go ahead and take that and dip out the PR, and then he rolled out. And that, you know, yeah, and that seems like just like he ghosted her thing, but we know it's a lot more than that. And by that, like, the first 2 episodes had a lot of information, but that's when, like, episode 3, when things really got crazy, really got crazy. And like I said, like, to that part, it just made it seem like Carole's hands were super clean on his disappearance, and we all know that ain't true, because we wouldn't feel the way we did after watching the documentary itself. So like, it was kind of interesting how they navigated through that part of the story here. We also seen her in the light of being a mom to Jamie after Don went missing, which was interesting as well, because I didn't gain that appreciation for her during the documentary. I felt like she, amongst all the things that she loved in the world, obviously cats being number 1, Jamie was a strong number 2. Like, she was a good mom figure to her, and that was not something we really saw displayed, I felt. And yeah, that was an interesting aspect to it. But yeah, with that being said, Joe on the other end, we see the abundance of relationships that he had. I mean, the poor guy, to be honest, you kind of sympathize with him a little bit, because he really never really had true love. Not to say that he was a perfect candidate for it. I mean, everybody deserves love, but not to say, like, you know, some of his actions didn't get reactions. we really just see him really struggling through a lot of, I'm going to say, grieving, and a lot of just not processing his own emotions, and thus that's where the exotic side of him comes out, because I think that's how he was coping, but it wasn't truly a display of who he really is. And that could be a little bit of a tricky statement, but like that's kind of the opinion or expression that I got from everything. That was my take from all of that. But yeah, another interesting thing is, do you remember his staff that lost their arm? Well, they got his pronouns right in this, because in the documentary they were saying she, but actually pronouns is he, him. So I thought that was really cool that they made the corrections in this proper, as Saf was, again, the worker that had got mauled by the tiger, but now they got his pronouns right, which I thought was a very important thing, because that was one of the biggest marks from the documentary. Was like, that was wrong and inappropriate, and that should have been handled. But yeah, they got it right now here. Joe's wedding was very funny, very, very, very funny. Totally one of the highlights of it. Yeah, you gonna have to wait and see how that played out. We also got a little bit of perspective about Travis, his husband, and how Travis met Joe, and then Travis was the one that shot himself, and just how that changed everything, especially for Joe and everybody involved, because everybody loved Travis. I feel like Travis was the heart of the zoo, and once Travis was killed or killed himself, it changed everything. And I think that was truly the exclamation point of the end of Joe Exotic and that zoo. And like, of course, he remarried again, but it definitely was just over. It was over. But yeah, beyond that, we got the Joe and John getting into a fight, and John really loving him, which was something that I didn't know. I thought he was just kind of over it, and he was just part of that trio's wedding as like a formality or whatnot. But Sean actually really loved Joe, which was an interesting thing. And then the part that really did it for me is Joe, when he killed the tigers, because when he had to give up his zoo, he was like, well, nobody's gonna have my tigers. And the way how they shot that was just like but lastly, I think another thing that they gave more perspective on is when Joe got arrested and how that came about, and sort of gives you indication as to how they were tipped off, which was interesting. And like I said, upon Joe being arrested and being brought into court, Carole testifying was the first time that Joe and Carole had seen each other. And of course, there was absolutely no love in between the two of them. So the way how they shot that was super interesting, because you felt the tension, but also you felt this craze of like, they're the same people. They're literally the same people. Like, they're just, one ended up having a better outcome of this craziness than the other. But there's that. But yeah, like I said, when you got Eric Good that came in, that obviously brought in Carole, or was with Carole to do the documentary, that's when you got the one-to-one with the Netflix, who, if you don't know Eric, he's the director of the Tiger King documentary. And yeah, so you see how like the documentary kind of starts off, which is the conclusion of the series. So, but yeah, you got the courtroom drama. And the courtroom drama really added the dramatics, because it turned into a play of Joe doing what Joe does best. And I'm pretty sure this is what Joe was thinking in his mind when he was up there pleading his case. And yeah, they added all of the razzle dazzle to that. But we all know how that played out for Joe, and Joe is still doing time until like 2036, I believe it is. He was hoping Trump was going to help him out, but hey, he's still in there and Trump is out of there, so I don't think that's happening. So I don't know, but hey, the Tiger King legacy lives on, because we got more content with Joe versus Carole on Peacock March 3rd. Listen, check this one out. I really had a good time with this. I was absolutely hooked. There were so many more things I could talk about with this, but for the majority of the facts I went over right now with it, hopefully that's enough to convince you to want to watch it. But I think it was still a good time, a fun watch, and Peacock has still continued their momentum, and this was definitely a good step forward. You know, you would think, how do I need to know, how or why should I want to know more about Tiger King and Joe Exotic and anything? Well, how is because they're doing it from a dramatized series, and why is because, well, it's Tiger King. You know it's going to be silly. You know it's going to have some laughs, have some just all sorts of different things in terms of entertainment. But also there was some heart to this. There was some heart. I absolutely at points felt I sympathized for Carole. I sympathized for Joe. I certainly sympathize for every bit of the folks that was involved with this, that were just like bystanders, that really didn't know the craze that was going on behind this. Like that was, you know, it's just kind of hard to put into words, man. But you know, and even Carole's last husband, you know, poor guy, because you know, he just stood by her the entire time, and she literally cared about nothing but those damn cats. That's it. That was kind of a sad thing. Seeing him kind of go to bed one night, he was just kind of sad and kind of was like, what was I doing? Oh, how did I forget the CGI with the tigers? Very noticeable. Not the best, but very, so I'll just say very noticeable. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, check it out, folks. I'll stop talking. Check it out. Jump in the comments. Let me know your thoughts about it when you do. And I'll see you around for more reviews very soon.